Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to my top 30 all-time favorite games list. This is Red Shadow, and it's been about a week or so since I last did a video. That was not my intention. I didn't really want to kind of fall off the project here, but every time I get started on something like this, that's what tends to happen. I'm also apologize if I look sleepy or anything like that in this. I've been trying to readjust my sleep schedule and get back on track and be more like a normal human being. That being said, it's like about 5:40 in the morning. At this very moment, I've been up for like 3 hours. So, yeehaw. But anyway, I won't bore you with all that kind of stuff. This is my honorable mentions video. And I'm just going to say right up front, it's probably going to be another long one, because I have a lot of games in front of me. The more I thought about it over the last week, the more I thought of games that I really enjoyed that were worthy enough of a mention here. I'm going to try not to make each entry last as long as, say, the main videos do when I'm talking about my straight-up top 30. But just considering how much I have sitting here in front of me, I'm not so sure how that's going to work. So anyway, without further ado, we're going to go through this roughly generationally chronological, as in starting with stuff from like Super Nintendo era and then coming up to stuff that's more modern day. I've tried to lay this out in front of me so I'll be able to cover things in that way. So, as I mentioned, Super Nintendo. I don't have a Super Nintendo. I don't have the actual carts. The closest thing that I have to show in regards to Super Nintendo is, of course, my Super Nintendo Classic. This is just the box. The console itself is actually on my entertainment center behind me. But I want to point out a few on here. In particular, this one up here, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. When I covered Super Metroid in the 10 through 6 episode, that would have been the last one, I mentioned that there was another Super Nintendo game that was vying to be in the top 30, but in the end, I'm a bigger fan of Super Metroid on Super Nintendo than I am Link to the Past. My Zelda love grew later on when I got to Ocarina of Time, which I think was in the last video. I'm not even 100% sure. I'm pretty sure that was in my... I'm trying to remember off the top of my head my exact list in order. It's kind of hard to remember with all the different games. But A Link to the Past, I had seen somebody playing the original Zelda in like 1987 and was taken aback by how cool it was. But I never had a Nintendo Entertainment System, never had an NES or a Sega Master System, have very little experience with those. The more I watch YouTubers of people, especially like in my age range, talking about old gaming stuff, I realize that I missed out on a lot with that generation, although I'm not bothered that I missed out on the difficulty level in a lot of those games, but I missed out on some pretty formative stuff like the original Zelda. And I can tell you that for years I didn't even know that Zelda 2 was a thing. I would have thought back when I was younger that Link to the Past was the second Zelda game. But Link to the Past was a big deal for me when it came out on the Super Nintendo, because those 16-bit graphics, it was beautiful. It was definitely the formula that I'm used to more with Zelda games, which is just like, I know the NES constraints didn't allow it to have verticality on the levels, but like climbing mountains, going up and down stairs, jumping down to platforms, falling into holes in castles and stuff, and Link to the Past, all that stuff just kind of blew my mind, and I really, really loved it. Loved the graphical style, the colors, the story, as simple as it was. That was really when I got wrapped up into it all. And just based off of that one game experience, and then seeing how they changed things with Ocarina of Time, like blew my brain even more. My mind was just melting when I got to Ocarina of Time and some of the newer games. But Link to the Past will always be, one of my favorite games just because of its impact on me at that moment. and how much I loved it. Now, a couple other quick shots from off the box here. We got Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario World. Super Mario World is my favorite Mario game of them all. I love it way more than 3, which seems to be a lot of people's favorite, and way more than the original 1 and 2, and way more than the ones that came after. I've said it before, and I'll say it a million times. I hate Super Mario 64. I want to explore more of like Sunshine, Galaxy, Galaxy 2, Odyssey, etc., etc. But Super Mario World was just one of the best games to own on the Super Nintendo, in my opinion. And I'm not even sure if I ever beat the game. I'm not sure that it's ever a game that I feel like I need to sit down and go from start to finish. I just like to run around in those levels and explore the secrets and stuff that are in there. And what I felt was like the best evolution of Mario World, or of Mario up to that time, that was Super Mario World for me. So that one's always fondly remembered. And then, like I said, Donkey Kong Country. I love the whole entire trilogy, and in particular 1 and 2, because those are the ones I played the most of. I don't think I really played a lot of 3 back in the day. I think it was just timing, and it was the fact that I never could beat any of the Donkey Kong Country games. So I wasn't super... I wasn't, just like I am now, I'm not super eager to keep piling on new games, new entries in a series if I haven't beat the other games. But I love all of those. I wish that this thing had all 3 of the Donkey Kong Country games. But sadly, it wasn't meant to be. And I'm just looking over the back of the box here. I think the only other one on here I really want to shout out would be Super Mario RPG, which is, unfortunately, has just the little tiniest little box up here. But Super Mario RPG was my first JRPG of all time, followed by Chrono Trigger and then Final Fantasy VII. Super Mario RPG was, of course, it was charming as hell. It was cool how it, pulled the Mario characters in the Mario universe in with, like, Squaresoft's version of JRPGs. They'd done several prior to that, but like I said, it was just the first one that I ever played, so it definitely gets a shout out. I love Super Mario RPG. And the other thing that I will mention is a game I've barely even played into, but it's based on a property that I love, and I just love the game when I do get a chance to play it. And that's Shadowrun, based on an old pen and paper RPG. My favorite concept for pen and paper RPGs, the mixing of fantasy and magic and all that with cyberpunk type stuff. If CD Projekt Red could have done any other property than Cyberpunk 2077 for the game that they did, I would have loved to have seen them do a Shadowrun game. And maybe somebody somewhere down the road will do one. There was one on the Xbox 360, but it focused more on the gun and technology stuff, and I never played it because that just never interested me. So, I'll move up next to a couple of PC games that I have on here, on my honorable mentions. First up, we got Sanitarium, a really cool sort of like psychological horror game with a graphical style that I can only best describe as being similar to like a Diablo, like an isometric 2D-ish sprite style game where you walk around, interact with people, solve puzzles. Has a weird story to it, but I really, really enjoy it. And I wish that it was maybe a little more accessible today. I think these old PC versions and maybe like GOG or Steam are the only way you can get to it now. But it's a fun, worthwhile PC experience. And then I've got, now this is just the only one that I own. Maybe the only one I ever owned, or maybe I own more and this is the only one I have left. But this is You Don't Know Jack 3, Volume 3. This is like a funny trivia quiz style game for multiple people to play. Disc says 1997. That seems and sounds about right. The you don't know, Jack games they still exist to this day. In fact, I think I have a Jackbox collection on PS3 or Xbox 360, but I've never played it. But back in the 90s, these games were hilarious. Me and a couple of my friends from one of the jobs I had in the mid to late 90s used to get together and play games from time to time, and that one came up quite frequently. I think it was my friend Brian who actually introduced it to me and my friend Todd, and we played it, and it's just hilarious. I won't regale you with a whole bunch of tales of it, but it was such a great party game with a sarcastic style host, and the whole theme to the whole thing is it's not just like jolly and happy. It's like the host takes shots at you when you screw up, and it's a difficult game. It does trivia in a weird way, and a lot of the references and stuff in it flew over my head, but I still held my own most of the time. But like I said, it just it was such a fun game to play, and when I was thinking about games that should go on this list, I was like, it's got to go in my honorable mentions. And then the last PC game, even though I'm going to show you a PS4 game, because I don't have, and I don't think there is a physical PC version of this, but this is the Rust console edition that I'm holding here. Came out a few months ago. I had to have it, but I haven't actually played it yet, and I'll try to explain why here in a second. But my experience with Rust goes back to its early days on PC. I think I saw it being highlighted on some YouTubers' channels and saw some stuff about it online and looked interesting. At that time, I didn't really know what all of these, aside from like Minecraft, I didn't really know what all of these survival, crafting, resource gathering style games were all about. So I was intrigued. And then, like I said, there was some YouTubers, and one in particular who bought his own server so that, you know, people who watched his content could play on the server on their own and sometimes interact with some other YouTubers when they were in there. And I had a good time with it, and I met some people that are still friends to this day. In fact, it happened because the original server that he acquired, for some reason, he set it up wrong or something happened, and people could still go in there and play on it, but it was only, I think, gonna exist for a while until the server, you know, I think you paid for a year or however much time, or you pay until you just don't want to pay for it anymore. But a handful of us ended up in that server playing, and those are the people that I ended up having, you know, friendships that now have lasted for like 6-7 years. So that was what was fun about it. I was shit at the game. I was shit at building stuff. I don't care much for the loop in these kinds of games where it's like you build a thing, but it's not quite strong enough, so now you have to go get this resource, and now you have to rebuild and reinforce, and the whole time you can get raided at any point by anybody else who's on the server, and you can lose all that kind of progress. And I'm not I'm not a fan of making any kind of progress and then something happening and you get set back by a ways. Games where the save files corrupt, games where they don't allow you to save as frequently as they should, games that are just tough to be tough. I don't care for any of that kind of stuff. But I still had a fun time existing in that world, playing with these other people, being friends, being allies, and I really enjoyed the world of Rust when it first came along. But this is, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before. I have a video on my channel about my enjoyment of Rust, but that was like more back then. I don't know how much evolution in that game had happened by the time I kind of developed this new opinion about it. But it's a big reason why I won't get in on early access games anymore, because Rust from then to what Rust is now was completely different. The core gameplay mechanics and all that kind of stuff are the same, sure, but the game looks different, it feels different, the world that you exist in is different. I think you can still go back to the old version of Rust, but I figure that most people are in the newer version of Rust, and The old version is just that. It's going to be looked at as old. My connection with Rust lies with that original version. And so this newer version doesn't really do much for me. That's why I bought the PS4 version to kind of support the developer, because he's also the developer of another one of my all-time favorite games. But I never really had any super intentions to get into it all that much. I know that I pop it in PS4 and go play it. My experience is not going to be what it was years ago. But it still ranks up there just for sort of like that special place in your heart kind of thinking. Okay, so that moves us off of PC, and now we'll get into some PS1 games. So, first thing up I want to show is Tomb Raider 2. This is my favorite of the original 5 Tomb Raider games, I guess. The ones that all pretty much landed on PS1 Dreamcast era. I think Tomb Raider 2 was like the best of all of those. I'm a big fan of the reboots, but I think that I still like this one more than all the rest. And it could just be a weird nostalgia thing. Because like I said, the Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider, Shadow of the Tomb Raider trilogy was great. But I think this is just because this was when I was really going all in on video games. And the Tomb Raider games were so cool. The atmosphere was there. There was platforming, shooting, exploration. These are so many of the things that I love in games now, even though it was clunky and had its own variation of like tank controls. This was the kind of stuff that I was playing and eagerly awaiting more games like this when I had my PS1. So that's Tomb Raider 2. Let's show this up next. We got Metal Gear Solid. And also, I have greatest hits and non-greatest hits versions of these games, and I don't really care one way or another. Like, collecting wise, sure, I'd love to have a Black Label version of this too, but this is what I have, and that's all right with me. A Metal Gear Solid, this one could have made it into my top 30. I think if I had to really, if looking at all this stuff, if I had to say what game was 31, it's probably Metal Gear Solid. But Metal Gear Solid is just Hideo Kojima's masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. I'm a fan of Metal Gear Solid 2. I'm not a big fan of 3. I don't really have any experience with 4 and 5 yet. And Metal Gear Rising Revengeance I haven't played. I do own all of them. In fact, like I said, this is my PS1 copy of Metal Gear Solid. I also have the Metal Gear Solid Essential Collection on the PS2. And what this is Metal Gear Solid 1 in a PlayStation 2 style case, but this is just the PS1 game. And then you've got Metal Gear Solid 2, which, like I said, I enjoy Metal Gear Solid 2. I've never beat it. And then 3, I don't care for 3 because, this is my reason for this, and hopefully, if you know anything about these games, then this isn't spoilers for you, but 3 does not star Solid Snake, but it stars Big Boss, a character that looks like Solid Snake, so it felt like an interesting way to say, we know you love Solid Snake, but we're telling a different story, but he still looks like Solid Snake, so it's cool, right? I didn't care for that. I didn't care for going back to the Cold War era. It's like 60s or 70s, so I didn't like running back on technology, even though the technology is wild and out there in Metal Gear Solid in general. But I wanted to be Snake. I wanted to be in contemporary times. I wanted to continue the story from 1 and 2. And, you know, if you've played 2, then you kind of know that you don't spend as much time with Snake as you do in the first one. And I'm not a hater on Raiden. I just missed my boy, Solid Snake. And Boss's story, I didn't care about it, and I still don't. And I know that that's a big knock against 5, or will be a knock against 5 for me. The presentation, the graphics, the gameplay look amazing in 5. But it's it's back to Big Boss. It's back to a different time frame, and I'm iffy on that. But the first Metal Gear Solid, I love it. Absolutely love it. Alright, effort of time. It's try to flow this along a little faster. Mega Man Legends 2, the sequel to the first Mega Man Legends. I've already covered Mega Man Legends in my regular because it's one of my all-time favorite games. 2 is a level below for me because it lost some of the charm and the humor that the first game had, and it delves more deeply into the main story of Mega Man Legends, and that I could appreciate. But all it really ultimately did was move us towards a conclusion that we never got and probably never will. So that's a bummer. But 2 is still up there for me. I love that game. And this is a similar experience here. This is Lunar 2 Eternal Blue complete. Lunar the Silver Star Story complete is in my top 30. And I absolutely love both of these games. But I think it's a matter of the one that I played first is the one that kind of gets my love and adoration after all these years. And I actually played these chronologically as they were coming out. I didn't come to them later on. I have examples of that just in my gaming history of coming to a game after it had come out and playing them out of order. In fact, one of those will be in this honorable mentions, and then sometimes that's enough for me to love that version more. But Lunar 2 is absolutely worth it. Grand JRPG, epic story and adventure, great characters, great music, great animation, love it. And I'm going to show this telegraphs, if people don't already know, some of my favorite games of all time. This may telegraph one of my favorites because it's not in this pack. But we got Final Fantasy VIII. We got Final Fantasy IX. We have Final Fantasy Anthology, which is 5 and 6. 6 is a really, really good one. I haven't played all the way through it, but I do enjoy it quite a bit. It's probably just under some of the aforementioned ones. 5 I don't have a lot of experience with. Here we got Final Fantasy Chronicles. Chronicles has Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger. That's a great one. I kind of meant to mention it more when I was talking about Super Nintendo games, but I haven't gotten more than a few hours in the Chrono Trigger, so it's still kind of an alien thing for me. So I feel kind of lucky that it's a game I will eventually, once I get around to it, get to experience almost for the first time all these years later. There's Chrono Trigger, and then this is Origins. This is unopened. This is Final Fantasy 1 and 2. I essentially in my collection have every Final Fantasy game, let's say all the mainline Final Fantasies, not including 11 and 14, the online ones, and 3, the only one that didn't come to PS1 when they were putting out all these. So someday I'd like to play 3, but that's going to be hard because I'm getting rid of my handheld stuff, so it's not like I can play I think it's DS version, or maybe it's Game Boy Advance, I don't even remember. Alright, so that's pretty much all the PS1 stuff. So now we're going to get into some PS2 mostly, although you'll see some other games, but it'll be apparent why I'm showing them here in a moment. But one of my all-time favorite Rockstar games, Bully. This is Bully for the PS2. It's kind of that embossed cover there is real nice. So Bully, love Bully. And then Bully Scholarship Edition for the 360 with some additional content. I don't have the Wii version. I'm not sure that I'd ever want to get the Wii version, but I love Bully. It's just Grand Theft Auto Light with a kid who goes to a rich school, gets dumped there by his mom and her new husband, and he gets bullied. It's not necessarily a game where you bully and you're a terror. You're not a great kid, but you actually kind of stand up for yourself and other people in this game in a lot of ways. But you also do get up to a lot of mischief in it. But I really love that one. And then we just got the entire Grand Theft Auto trilogy. That's Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which is my favorite of the PS2 trilogy and was my favorite up until GTA 5. And I also bought the Xbox 360 version, which I think they were always platinum hits, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't opened this. I haven't played this. I bought it digitally on the 360, which is not something I did a lot of. And then not that long afterwards, we got a physical copy on the 360. But every time I did go back to play it, it was just my digital version. Alright, more PS2 games. Mlb06 the Show, my all-time favorite baseball game, my all-time favorite sports game, if you don't count wrestling-related games. For legit sports, Mlb06 the Show is my favorite. I still have a career file save that I go back to every once in a while in this game of a player who I'm trying to take all the way to the end of his career and see if he gets into the Hall of Fame. I do have a lot of the newer show games, and a lot of them are really great. They look amazing. There's just something simplistic about that. I think the new MLB The Show games are way more simulated, and then there's a lot of older baseball games and sport games that are more arcade and over the top. And that one straddles the line really good, where it's not overly difficult. You're not having to do so many button combinations for every little thing that you need to do in the game. I think it's just about as accessible a game as you can get. I don't think it looks too bad these days if you're playing with the right kind of connection on a newer TV. The only thing that maybe you'd be against is the rosters and teams and stuff like that. Some things have changed, logos have changed, etc., etc. But I'd make my case for Mlb06 the Show like any day of the week. And since I brought it up, let's go ahead and jump to this one here. This is WWE. This was like the first year, I think. WWE Smackdown, Here Comes the Pain. This is my favorite of all of the Smackdown line of video games. That includes going up to like WWE 12 and 13, and then the 2K era that started with 14 all the way up to 20, which I'm playing right now, and it's actually not too bad. I'm sure it's been patched to hell. Excuse me, it's been patched to hell because the original version of that game was bad, glitchy. But I still have a bunch of saved created wrestlers for this game on one of my PS2 memory cards. Still play it whenever I get a chance. It's a lot of fun. Alright, we're going to jump to Area 51. This is a first-person shooter that takes place in Area 51, and you're a soldier. You go in because something has happened, and it's aliens are getting loose. It's kind of, tropey and predictable. But what I loved about it was, first of all, it was a good time, and it was fun, but it was the voice cast. Right here should be that little bit of line right there. And that says, featuring the voices of David Duchovny from The X-Files, my favorite TV show, Powers Booth, who's just a character actor guy that I recognize, and Marilyn Manson, who did the voice of an alien in the game. Marilyn Manson's kind of a controversial person all around, but especially in more recent times. So that's kind of a bummer, but I really enjoyed Marilyn Manson's music back in the 90s and early 2000s. And just to have this cast and crew, this came out 2005, so it was a couple years after the X-Files had wrapped up. It was just really cool to hear my boy David Duchovny on a game that I got to play, and the game was good. Alright, here's my favorite PS2 JRPG. Not that I have a lot of experience with the JRPG library in the PS2, but I love Radiata Stories. This game is hilarious. It's fun. It's sort of a PS2 version of a Suikoden game, even though there were Suikoden or Suikoden games on the PS2. I love the way that you could recruit people throughout the game world. The story takes some weird twists and turns, and about halfway, 2/3 of the way through, you have to make this big decision that kind of cuts off a bunch of the game. But I guess that was maybe, promotes replayability. I played it the beginning of last year for the first time in years and had a blast with it. So it's a lot of fun. And the last main PS2 game that I have here, well, second to the last, let's say, Spider-Man 2, the game that was based off of the movie that also included extra content that was like pulled from the comic books. But this Marvel Spider-Man for PS4 is an amazing game. It looks great. The cutscenes, the story, acting, the motion capture, it's all really good, and it feels awesome to move around in that game as Spider-Man. But this, to me, was the first one that allowed you to really swing around and feel great as Spider-Man, and I still love it for that. And exploring New York, climbing on buildings, just climbing up to the top of a building somewhere or around the sides of some building and just finding a hidden token there that you weren't prompted to go find. It like promoted the explorability of the world and the verticality of the world, and it was just amazing. And it had NPCs moving around all over the place, not as technical as the ones in the newer game, but I don't know, it was just the perfect storm at the right time for me. This one I still love. And this one and some other games from the era were a peak time for me to be hanging out on the GameFAQs message boards. I loved going to the message board for this game, for Mortal Kombat Deception, and for a handful of other games. It was just one of those, I think of this game and I think about that moment in time for me when it comes to, for me, there's so much stuff in my life that's highlighted in the video games and the internet and the music and the movies and all that kind of stuff. And that's a particular memory that I have with that game was the GameFAQs message boards and just how much I loved hanging around on those and talking to people about stuff. All right, so this will be kind of a quick one. This is like a predecessor to a game here and then a game on my proper list. But this is Gun for the PlayStation 2. Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2 are awesome games. But before those games existed, there was Gun. There was Red Dead Revolver, and that game was okay. I own it. I've played it. I like it. But it didn't do what this game did, which was the first one to kind of open it up into an open world. And then the Red Dead games escalated it, into the stratosphere. But I love Gun so much that I have got a self-professed gun club. I see the meme and the shirts are like, welcome to the gun club. And I'm like, well, this is my gun club. Because I have an unopened GameCube copy of Gun. I have original Xbox copy of Gun. And I have the Xbox 360 copy of Gun. All I'm missing from having a complete collection, and I'm still looking for them. I hope to get them at some point down the road, but it's not a huge priority. But there was a physical PC version and a version for the PSP. I'd like to find both of those to eventually, like I said, complete the gun club or the gun show. And I'm gonna throw one 3DS game in here because of all the games that I played on the 3DS that left a mark, had an impact or whatever. This is the main one that I still come back to. Well, I would if I still had a 2DS or a 3DS, but this is Tomodachi Life. I also have a video about this game in my original favorite games playlist. But this game was just silly, nonsensical fun. This was a Sims or an Animal Crossing game that appealed to me. Make a bunch of these me characters, make original characters, or create somebody from real life. There were multiple websites that allowed you to scan QR codes for me's that people had created that looked like a cartoon character, a real life celebrity, a video game character from another game, etc., etc. And so I used to love to populate my little island and my apartment building and my houses with these characters and take them through their really silly and nonsensical and monotonous at times routines. Buy them food, feed them, get them clothes. They're going to complain about this thing or that thing that's going on, and you've got to help them. Or you can just sort of let them be and do their thing. They can have relationships. They can get married. They can have kids. If there's any version of rolling the credits in this game, it's usually when your married couple has a child. If you don't watch and play the game, if you don't play the game and engage in the game for a while, then when you come back to the island, they'll mention, it's been a long time since we've seen you. It's like, it's really cool. It's simplistic, and I always wanted to see a direct sequel to this. There have been some other things that people have said is kind of like a sequel. Excuse me. Metopia is brought up. It's sort of a role-playing game that stars these me characters. And then there was a mobile game that I can't remember the name of that a lot of people said was very similar to this. But I don't know. This is so much fun. If I were to ever... I probably won't get rid of this copy. And if I were to ever get another 2DS or 3DS, I'd be ready to go to play this game again. Alright, let's jump into this last stack of games. We're going to dabble in some 360 and transition over to some PS4 type stuff. So the first thing I want to show is like one of the most synonymous games with the term hidden gem, Enslaved Odyssey to the West. I have not played this game in years, and I really want to play it again. And I'm not going to lie, I would really love to see this get like a remaster over to some of the newer consoles. It's probably too late to see it come to the PS4. But if it did, I would be all over it. And maybe if it's even possible that it's got like a digital version, I would probably go after that. This game was so cool, sort of a post-apocalyptic world. It's got a lot of platforming and hand-to-hand style combat. Has a really cool story. I love the characters in it. It's really, really good. Like I said, it's a shame that it either doesn't have a sequel or it isn't available on newer consoles. I did miss picking something off the shelf for this, but we'll show this anyway. Batman Arkham Asylum. I should have showed the Return to Arkham for PS4. I played those just a couple years ago, but I also played this back on the 360. I loved it. I have played Asylum and City. I haven't played Origins or Arkham Knight, but of the original two, this is my favorite. To me, Arkham Asylum gets it all right. City expands on a lot of stuff, but I feel like it sort of lost something when it went to a more open world, and I love open world games. But the reason why I love Asylum so much is because it reminded me of games like Resident Evil 1 and 2 and 3 on the PS1, Dino Crisis, Metal Gear Solid even a little bit, in that it takes place in one particular location. There's a lot of explorability, a lot of places you can go in the Arkham Asylum. Multiple buildings, outdoor, indoor, lots of secrets, lots of stuff going on in it. But City took what was, probably like this big and filled it out. And that was fun, but walking around out on the streets and not having as much time in specific buildings, the backtracking, in those kinds of games, I love the backtracking. Because if something happens in a game in one part of a facility that's memorable and really cool, it's fun to come back later and see how things have changed or just reminisce over what you experienced then. So I love that about Asylum. Like I said, Asylum's here, City's like right here. It's not like I hate City. I feel like I have to make that distinction anytime I say that. I just don't want people to think that I thought City was a waste of time. It's an amazing game. It's awesome. That's what's hanging up back here on my wall is this big banner right here that some of it's blocked off by the shelves and stuff, but it's an Arkham City banner. I love Arkham City. It's an amazing game, but Asylum just means more to me. When I played that the first time, it took me back to, I don't remember exactly when Asylum came out. This is saying 2011, so I don't know if that's original when it came out, or if that's when this Greatest Hits type or Game of the Year edition Platinum Hits came out. But at that time, it would have been 10 to 15 years after I'd played Dino Crisis and Resident Evil and Metal Gear Solid and those kind of games, and it just took me back. And that's the thing I love about games and home entertainment media in general, is the way that I can play or revisit something now, and it takes me back to when I first played that stuff. And when I play something that reminds me of those kind of games, it takes me back as well. Alright, next thing we're going to show here is Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, one of the many, many, many different releases of this game. I particularly enjoy the special edition from the PS4. This is the one that I've played and completed 2 times in the last couple of years. After having had a 360 version like this and never really getting that far in it. By the way, this is just the version that comes in one of the really big, cool special editions. And I managed to buy this and like the book that I think that comes with it. But the full package has a big box and a big dragon statue. That I didn't get, but at the time I just wanted a copy of Skyrim for 360 because that's what I had. But then when they released the version on PS4, that was where I poured all my time in it. What can I say? It's Skyrim. Elder Scrolls games are really cool. I've played some Morrowind, some Oblivion, but Skyrim to me was the culmination of everything that Bethesda put into that game and that series at this point. Because all we've had since then is Elder Scrolls Online, which I've played and it's okay, but it doesn't feel the same as the single player experience. But I can't say enough about Skyrim. It probably would have cracked my top 30 if it wasn't for one simple fact. You're kind of just a lifeless character, even though you can pick a race, pick a species, pick a male, female, give them, make them look however you want. In the end, they're just kind of a faceless, voiceless avatar that you just travel the world in. And I don't think that Skyrim's story is the most epic thing that, you've ever played. Not like Witcher 3, not like a Red Dead 2, not like a whole bunch of other stuff. Not like any of these JRPGs that I've played. So it's more of a sandbox world that has story and has lore, but you have to kind of like mind palace your own headcanon for it. And I just run around, kill shit, do missions, become a badass thief, become an assassin, become the Dragonborn, etc., etc. That's what I love about Skyrim. So that's why it doesn't like crack into my top games. But honorable mention. All right. So next up, Red Dead Redemption for the Xbox 360. One of the main reasons why I got an Xbox 360 in 2010 was because this game was incoming. Excuse me. And I wanted to make sure that I played it. There's a lot of noise going on outside of my house right now. I think it's the trash truck. Well, there's a little thing I can't bleep or edit out, but yeehaw. I don't know if that's what just happened, but anyway, Red Dead Redemption for the Xbox 360. I definitely wanted to play this. I was going through my divorce at that time. I didn't have a whole lot of money, but I also didn't have any of my consoles. They were still with my soon-to-be ex-wife and would be for a while longer. So I wanted a game console. 360 was the cheapest game or console at the time. In the end, I paid $150 for my Xbox 360 in 2010, so I don't think that was too bad. And this was one of the big reasons why I wanted to, because I wanted to play Red Dead. I'd been hearing about Red Dead Redemption for so long. And after having played Gun, after having played Red Dead Revolver, I wanted to play this game. And it was fantastic. It's just interesting how Rockstar stepped up their game with Red Dead and then astronomically blew everything away with Red Dead 2. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Undead Nightmare, which I played for the first time back in 2018. Fun. I like it. I don't think it's the most amazing thing ever. A lot of people say it's the greatest DLC of all time. I don't think so. I would put like Blood and Wine for Witcher 3 up there. Left Behind for The Last of Us. But this was still a good time. I enjoyed it a lot. And this was probably before zombie stuff was starting to get oversaturated. Alright, now here's an interesting series to say the least. And my history with this is kind of all over the place. But I'm going to show first the Mass Effect trilogy from the Xbox 360. I'm not going to pull it all the way out, but you know, it's a bunch of discs. It's really cool packaging. I loved it. Loved having all of these together because I hadn't had a chance to play these games as they were first originally coming out. Because the first Mass Effect was only on Xbox. I think when the first Mass Effect came out, it was like 2007, so that was years before I had my Xbox. But I watched these games from afar, and I was like, man, I really want to check that game out. And so I had to wait. But when this came out, I pounced on it. And then I played the first Mass Effect. I got stuck a few hours in. I got really confused and upset and frustrated. And I put the game down, and I didn't touch it for like 5 years. And the only reason why I really touched anything Mass Effect wise was because a friend of mine was a big Mass Effect fan, and he kept talking up the new release that was coming out, Mass Effect Andromeda. And I was like, well, I haven't played the other games, I don't really know, but he just kept talking about it, and I was like buying into his hype, and I was all over it. And of course I know some people out there are thinking, oh my god, well, this guy got really disappointed. Actually, no. I made the decision about a month, I think, after this came out, to pick it up. They patched out all the glitchy faces and goofy animations and all that kind of stuff. It sucks that shit has to be patched before it's complete and in working order. But the game that I played at that point, I loved. And I loved it so much that even later on, the same year Red Dead 2 came out, I went and played Mass Effect. I went back to this and played Mass Effect 1 all the way through, got past the part that was holding me up. It was like no problem. Played Mass Effect 2, and then played about half-ish of Mass Effect 3, and then Red Dead 2 came out, and I played that, and I didn't go back and finish. I didn't actually go back to finish the original trilogy till Legendary Edition came out a couple months back. And I played all three of these games, including the third one with all the really cool DLC for the first time. I neglected to mention that when I played Mass Effect 1 and 2 and part of 3 in 2018, after I got to that point where I stopped in 3, this was still my favorite Mass Effect game. I still think that this game is really good and holds up really, really well. Maybe it's because I played this first before the original trilogy. Now that I've played this version and played through all the way through 3, 3 is actually my favorite. And this is probably going to surprise some people, but I would rate it 3, Andromeda, 1, and then 2 last. But that doesn't mean I don't like 2. 2 is fucking great. They're all great. It's just my least favorite. I find it to be the least interesting of all of the Mass Effect games. I don't know what else to say, but the discovery in the first game was great. The let's get the band back together in 2 was also really awesome, but like I already knew a bunch of stuff. It was already established for me, and the suicide run thing doesn't really do anything for me. And 3 was the one that really celebrated, in my opinion, the characters and the world and the fun that is playing Mass Effect and getting to know all these people. Andromeda was just this cool, big, open world game that I was craving when I had my PS4 originally. When I played that game, I'd only had my PS4 for like a year or two. I was all about it. So, Mass Effect 3, I could also probably say almost makes it into my top 30, but not quite. The competition is just too stiff. Alright, down to the last few things. We're doing good on battery life. So let's go ahead and jump through this, especially because this, well, I'm going to save this one here for last. We'll go next to this. This is Dying Light The Following. This is the game made by the people who made Dead Island and Dead Island Riptide. 2 games that I really, really enjoy and might have made it into the honorable mentions if it wasn't for how fucking awesome Dying Light is and how it takes the zombie the genre and adds the parkour element to it and makes you feel like a badass jumping across rooftops and avoiding nasty creatures, especially the ones that come out at night. Dying Light is just pure. It's like I'm not qualified to talk about drugs because I don't do them and I don't really pay attention to them, but I do feel like if you were going to just take a video game and it was going to be like an adrenaline high and just inject it right into your veins, that's what this game is. It can be slow and it can be, have its story moments and all that kind of stuff, but I love the shit out of it every time I play it, and it's one of the first games I bought for my PS4, so it also has a special place in my heart due to that. Now, this is going to feel like I'm rewinding here, but I do have PS4 versions of this. But I'm just going to show, initially, The Walking Dead on the Xbox 360. This was the first season, but I noticed when pulling this off the shelf earlier that it doesn't say Season 1 on it, because I don't think at the time they knew for sure that this was going to go on, but it was such a fantastic game. And I mentioned it when I was talking about Life is Strange and Wolf Among Us, that this could possibly have been on my top 30 favorite games, if not for the fact that I just haven't played the entirety of it yet. But I'm pretty sure I bought this digitally on my Xbox. It's one of those few digital purchases. Then I got the physical when it came along. And then later on, I picked up the Walking Dead Collection. And this was Seasons 1. Let me see on the back of this. Yeah. Season 1, Season 2, 400 Days, and Michonne, and then I think it also has Season 3. Yeah, there it is on the front, right in front of my face. Season 1, 2, A New Frontier, which was Season 3, 400 Days and Michonne miniseries, which were the DLCs that came out like in between Seasons 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. I have played Seasons 1, the 400 Days DLC, Season 2, Michonne. I have not played A New Frontier or the last season. And I wanted to get the separate Season 4 version of this, but then in the fallout and out of the rubble of Telltale folding up, they released the definitive series that has everything all together. All of it is together as far as I know. None of this is download. This is the perfect culmination of the whole entire series. I'm looking forward to playing this again real soon so that I can get to some of the other stuff that I haven't played yet and see what the full story was. But I'm also kind of hoping that that's it for The Walking Dead with this new Telltale that's coming back. I know they want to do a sequel to The Wolf Among Us, and I'm fine with that, but I hope that they leave The Walking Dead dead and buried, so to speak, and not try to resurrect it, because I think I'd like for it to be what it is, and then that's it. It doesn't need to continue on. So that's everything. That's everything that I laid out here. Nothing is really coming to my mind right now to mention at this point. So I guess I'll just wrap it up and say that's it. That's my honorable mentions. Thanks for sticking around and watching all the way through to the end if you did. Thanks for listening to me babble on and on and on about video games and get distracted by, I think, my trash truck coming earlier than normal. My trash can isn't out on the street. So anyway, thanks a lot for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.